MLK on Louvre.
Now, a lot of us are preachers, and all of us have our moral convictions and concerns, and so often we have problems with power. There is nothing wrong with power if power is used correctly. You see, what happened is that some of our philosophers got off base. And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites. So that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. It was this misinterpretation that caused the philosopher Nietzsche, who is the philosopher of the will to power, to reject the Christian concept of love. It was the same misinterpretation which induced Christian theologians to reject Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power in the name of the Christian idea of love. Now we got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. This is what we must see as we move on. Now, what has happened is that we've had it wrong and mixed up in our country. Through violence you may murder a murderer, but you can't murder. Through violence you may murder a liar, but you can't establish truth. Through violence you may murder a hater, but you can't murder hate through violence. Darkness cannot put out darkness. Only light can do that. And I say to you, I've also decided to stick with love. But I know that love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems. I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about it in some circles today. I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm talking about a strong, demanding love. I have seen too much hate. And I say to myself that hate is too great a burden to bear. I have decided to love. 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 If you're seeking the highest good, I think you can find it through love. 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 I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I have decided to love. 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 The concepts of love and power. Now we got to get this thing right. Power at its best is love.
Yeah, that's an important part of my belief system, especially talking about these childhood memories of toughening up a soft kid who doesn't really like confrontation. I was in my shell for a lot of my childhood until I had these tougher friends who toughened me up. through us getting into scrapping. Then like but then I know people who didn't fight or didn't have weren't you could tell they didn't have those experiences, and then they're kind of funny with violence, and so you glorify it if you have too much of it, but you also glorify it if you don't have enough of it. That's why I think that it's good to break that seal and roughen your hands a little bit in life. Hard work too. It's not like you want to be a day laborer, but learn how to put that sweat equity in, actually physically do something hard, because sometime in your life you might have to. You don't want blind spots. That's the whole thing about character. That's what the Greeks believed, a rounded character. So, yeah, Plato tried out for the Olympics. Didn't make it, but he was a decent wrestler, supposedly. And so I always wanted to, these people in history. Books I would read were The Great Brain. I really remember that was I would read every book in the library. Within my grade level, and a couple above, I prided myself in being able, I think I read like C.S. Lewis in like 4th grade, all the Chronicle and Narnia books, and those are like middle school grade level. So I was always, I guess that's that ego thing, trying to make sure I'm smarter than my class group, and then like wrestling with bigger people and stuff, trying to push past boundaries. But the Great Brain, what I liked about that is that they were really smart, that family. And they're set in the Wild West. It's this really interesting time period. But they also scrapped. So I read those in 5th grade maybe. And I was a new kid at school. Yeah, that was very formative, moving to 5th grade, because once I moved to Mission Elementary in Redlands, California, in 5th grade, then I met Mike. He tried to beat me up, became my friend, but it was, I know people from that class where they told me that they almost got jumped by like little gangster Mexican girls. Like, it was a tough, and then we had Filipinos too. We had a lot of immigrants, and then poor immigrant families. Those kids sometimes get a little crazy. They're over here, they don't really have the culture. Their parents are working really hard, so they're not really supervised. Their neighborhoods are really poor. There might be gangs and stuff. So there's some crazy stuff that happens. You have to learn some lessons quick. I remember a friend of mine, she told me in high school, she was like, some girls were going to try to beat her up. Girls go through this too. And she did something. She had a mouth on her, and she's the one who passed out our underground newspaper and got caught and didn't rat us out. She was a good one. And she said they were going to fight her or something. And because she had earned the respect of the Filipinos, they're like, we got your back. We got your back. Don't worry. You got a problem. We got your back. And they're like a clique. But the clique liked her. And they're just like, nah, we got you. Don't worry. These guys aren't going to bully you. So it's almost like prison. High school operates a lot like a prison with cliques and this and that. And I know because I was in for a couple weeks. People say, maybe 7 days, 1 week. People say, how much time you do? I did 7. 7 days, not 7 years. But it was a Bay of 500. There's a lot of dudes, a lot of fucking social shit. It's like fucking in my Bay of 500. And I've been to jail a couple times, but never for more than a couple days. And that was the longest stint. But yeah, if you're stupid, you could still fucking... I was going to be there for 60 days until fucking someone got me out. That's another story. It's coming later. But that's a good living your philosophy. I'm in, general population with these dudes. Or we were in county. I don't know what you call it. Fucking county jail. But, yeah, you got to kind of know how to get along, go along to get along. For example, I'm playing chess. I love chess. And we got to do that. We got to play chess. And I was just telling my folks about that this morning. Then we're going to get to the Great Brain. And then we're going to get to MLK. This is all going to get wrapped up. Shadows of the future. You might judge me harshly, saying, back then, my mind was all over the place. But I know what the fuck I'm doing, okay? You just fucking handle your shit, Shadows of the future. And I'll handle mine, because I'm doing my job. Are you doing yours? Huh? Fucking look over your shoulder, okay? I hear you fucking judging me from a year from now. You better not be more of an asshole. We're trying to be fucking kinder and softer in our older age, okay? You can still talk to yourself, though. It's okay to talk to ourselves. So, I'm playing chess. We have ramen. And, we can't smoke, so our currency that's what populations of human beings will always use something as currency, something as fucking esteem and to trade stuff. So for ours is what you can get from the commissary And I ain't been there long enough to go to the commissary, but people have ramens and other shit. People are also selling shit. You learn the smartest, people with the most ingenuity are in prison sometimes. Really interesting characters. I had notes. Hopefully, I kept them of all the people I met in there, and I was writing down notes of their stories as the writer, trying to collect stories and information. Until some dude told me, he was like, "Yo, because you make friends," and he's trying to look out. People look out for you if they think you're decent. He's like, they put people in here with us to try to get information to use against you at your trial. So you're over here asking people a lot of questions, but you might look like one of those people, so you should probably cool that. And I'm like, oh, my bad, I didn't realize. I was over here like, what are you in for? And what did you do? Oh, really? And writing down notes. But I was sincere enough in my goofiness, where my goofiness can sometimes get me in trouble, or sometimes toe the line where people are just like, you're fucking, I don't know. I get that a lot. I don't know if you're stupid or smart. You ain't the middle. You're one or the other. You either fucking really intelligent. You either know what you're doing, or you're the stupidest person I've ever met. Yeah, that's the guy with the social security number on his arm, right? So, we're playing chess. I love chess all my life, since all of my friends play chess. The tough ones, the smart ones. It's a great equalizer. You know, you learn the history of the game. Went through so many different countries. It evolved over since maybe the 1400s, but it's a cosmopolitan game. You fucking played in any metropolitan city with any ethnicity. It's a conversation. It's the human dialogue. The fucking pieces all even evolved. Like, anyways, I was reading about Mongolian history the other day, and they're talking about viziers, and I was like, the bishop was based off of the vizier. He's supposed to be your advisor. That's why he goes diagonally through the corners. He's the stealth. He's also your spies, your intelligence service. The game of chess is the history of military organization. It's I don't know if nowadays it would contain all the components, but it has some cool components. You have the heavy artillery, your rooks, which hold the line and are supposed to be used from afar. You don't really want rooks to be right in the middle of shit. They're best used from a distance, holding fucking a block of squares that you want. And then the viziers, the bishops, are really good at sneak attacks into places. You have the cavalry, of course, the knights. Yeah, it's interesting. The and what is the queens? Are those special forces, the queens? Your tier 1 fighting forces. There's something. I like how the king can do shit, because if you could use your king as a part of your attack, I had a really good game today that I saved. I just like screenshot all the moves, but it was nice because I don't think I did the right thing all the time, but I kept territory, certain squares, I kept control of them the whole game, which is, I think, in my development, learning how to respect geography and the art of war. The geography is also a tool. Geography is a part of your strategy. So if you watch like Braveheart or other movies about military campaigns, some of them will use the geography as a part of the setting of a decisive battle. The side that uses geography better to their advantage. So I'm starting to learn what your pawns end up as your geography. If you play your pawns the right way, you'll have them in a certain place that when the board simplifies to the end game, now you either have a good defensive buffer if you kept certain pawns in place around your king, and then you have other pawns that are anchoring your attack. So I really like this game today because the pawn settled into a position which it was really hard for the enemy to get around in order to attack me. And so I like my maneuverability and my use of geography, even though my attack and some of the moves I did were... That's why I saved some of these games, and you go back over it, you're like, all right, some of this I could have changed it here and there. But then the reason why I beat that guy, if you're in the 1300s, you're not using too much strategy, you're just playing clean games. So even with my mistakes, I beat him because he wasn't using the same type of... I could tell his level, his understanding of the game and his moves were just like you could tell if someone throws a better punch, or if they have a quicker snap, or they have more combinations if someone's just throwing a 1-2 combination, or we would call it chain wrestling, if someone's wrestling but they're constantly thinking about the next move they're setting up. It's like I attacked his queen, then he put a piece in front of it to defend it. And that's just begging me to put more pressure, unless you really know that I can't escalate to take that piece. If I'm attacking a piece I want, and you just put a piece in front of it, I might have already thought, all right, I'm just going to escalate this. And you have to be really sure that, because that's what I've learned too. If someone tries to defend something just by hiding it, if you just escalate the attack, eventually they'll get that piece. And so, especially with a queen, I could have just kept plying on the attack and eventually would have had to give up the piece or give up his queen. So that's not, and you don't want your queen pinned down. Someone's attacking the king too. So if you're going to interpose a piece, make sure you can defend that square, because otherwise you're just begging for them to just escalate on that square. That's what happens in chess, like life. When you have something of value, a piece or a square, and then how people start putting more and more resources in order to get that. And then you pull the chair out from under them and say, aha, I didn't want that square though. I actually wanted this square. So I had a couple of those good ones. But just how he was moving, like me attacking a piece and then he tries to interpose another piece. I'm just thinking in my mind, you just stuck that piece. That's bad, because now if you move the queen, you might as well move during the beginning. Now you have two pieces you're not going to move. You're basically, there's a momentum to this thing. That's a slower defense than you want to be. It's not just power, and it's not just about controlling the squares and the geography, but it's also about speed. We both have a plan, obviously, that would take moves to execute, and you're moving slower. It's what I noticed. And then there's this other thing he did too. What did he do? Well, that's how he lost. I had his queen on the run, his king on the run, scared him out of the corner he castled into. His king starts running. I have a rook and a queen that are within the distance of attacking his king within a move. And his king is on a diagonal for my rook. And so I put my queen right below that rook on that diagonal, which is, at this level, you start to see people are using discovered check, stuff like that. So you're not attacking stuff straight on. You're setting up, I think of it like setting up catapults. You're setting up little traps. And that's what George St. Pierre said, that the fighting game eventually gets to trap mode. At the lower levels, you're brute force. That's how Daniel Cormier caught, what's his name, that cool dude, he's just not, see, that's the problem. You don't think of his name off the top of your head. That's why he's not marketable. But he's a really good dude. He just needs to maybe show more of his personality. But he's the type of guy maybe who's like, fuck it. Daniel, I want to bring him up because he's a cool dude. Yeah, he needs to fight him. Heavyweight. If you look up him, who did he fight? The fucking dude from who's a firefighter. Maybe look that up. MMA firefighter. Stipe Miocic. Stipe. You know what they need? They need like a mnemonic device. Or I don't know. They need something. But Stipe is fucking too good to not be fucking. Well, that's what Daniel. They're not really playing the sport like it should be played, where they let the best fight the best consistently. So like Daniel fought Ray Lewis. It's like Stipe and Daniel need to fight again. But that's what Daniel beat him by noticing that after a clinch, he drops his guard. And so Daniel's been in this long enough to it's a simple trap, but he clinched him, separated, and then knocked him out. And Daniel just knew his rhythm. So, and that's just a simple setup. I noticed in chess 1300, you start using simple setups, and then it only gets more complicated from there. It's hard to look at high level games if you don't understand what people are trying to set up, because there's a lot of things you see that they're passing on, or you won't even realize why they sacrifice certain pieces, but they're setting up intricate traps, and then the other person is analyzing and not falling for them or undoing those traps. And that's just like high level, like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You just see people like hugging each other and stuff. You don't realize that each one of these could be a place where the guy could sink in a really good hold, and so they're constantly at this state of heightened tension. So I set up a simple trap, and he fell for it. Put my queen behind my rook on a diagonal, And then he used the same. That's what I noticed is at this level, people aren't clean in their game. He interposed his queen, so here's his king, here's my queen, and in between us is a rook. This is hard to do. Rook, and my queen, and his king. So basically, my rook was here, and his king, he ran out of the corner, because my queen was fucking A. Anyways, yeah, we got this. Here's his king. My queen went up here and checked him, and he runs out of the corner this way. And then so my queen comes down here, boom. And in between us, there's a rook. We're on a diagonal. That's a simple trap. So all I have to do now is move the rook, and I check him. So what does he do? He puts his queen in between the rook. And thinking, all right, if you move the rook, now I got my queen here. You don't want to trade queens. And also, so thinking of his motives, he, at that point, I had traded my rook for position. So I wasn't playing the cleanest game. That's what I think. I noticed from when I was fucking first starting chess. I have good strategy. I just need to clean it up. That's a lot of life. That's what I'm trying to do this year with my word. I have a high functioning mind, but I need to be cleaner and more precise. Focus. Most people about success, what that fucking douchebag on YouTube said. Everything's about focus. Bill Gates said, what's his name? And fucking Bill Gates and Warren Buffett both focus. But no. Focus is important for execution. But for me, it's character and values. Because those guys have shitty values and shitty character. And I'll substantiate that with shit. But like that's neither here nor there right now. But so I know that focus will help me execute. So, but I noticed with this guy, he again interposes. Before he did it with a queen, which I don't think is an efficient way to defend yourself. I'd rather run efficiently. If you have to, interpose. But now you're making that square. You have to defend that square. But he figured I'm not going to trade the queen because I had my queen behind my rook. So all I have to do is move the rook and all of a sudden discover check, which is a setup, a low-level setup. And then there's only more complicated setups. But he puts his queen in between the rook and the king, figuring, all right, move the rook. But now his queen's there. And if we trade queens, he was up a rook. I would have had a rook and a bishop. He would have had two rooks. And I've started to play enough end games where I know that if you're down like a rook towards the end game and you don't have decent pawn positioning, it's a bitch. So he was kind of like seeing that, all right, let's just simplify this. Let's trade a fucking rooks too. If I traded queens and I trade rooks, now I have a bishop versus his rook. And then that's pretty much hopeless unless I'm very clever on how I'm playing my pawns. And my pawns were decent, but I never... That's something I'm still working on, making sure my pawns are in a good position to make a run at the end of the game. So some little stuff, like you want your pawns next to each other. If you have them on top of each other, if you have them separated, you're fucked. Stuff like that you just have to, me not read in theory, you run through it, you're like, all right, well, separated pawns are really hard to defend when they're all on opposite sides of the court, of the board. So he interposed the fucking queen. And what I've always been naturally seen on the board is when you're stuck, that's what I'm hesitant about interposing pieces, because power. And that's what I think children are really good at. Power imbalances, values. They can tell who's stronger or weaker. The danger of having people like Trump as our official narrative leaders is that now children start thinking that that's power, that his personality works in the world when it doesn't. In my experience, he was artificially created. He could have only worked in this two-party system in which the other party promoted Hillary. I really doubt that his character could have defeated a person like Bernie Sanders, and I don't even think Bernie Sanders is the best guy in the world, but he has more character. But Hillary's character is on par with Trump if you look at her history. She's not. She doesn't have a word. She's very mendacious. She's a corporatist. They differ in their sophistication, but not so much in their values. That's why she went to his wedding. But this is a conversation that's not had in the main media. But so what I did is I did move the rook, not discovered check because now the queens are there, but I moved the rook to check the king. What happens then? That's really interesting. That's why I see in these higher level games is that there's these moves where if you check the king from multiple ways, the king has to move. If I use a knight and I get a discovered check where I move the knight and there's a check, but when I move the knight is also checking the king has to move because you can't kill two pieces at once. So if you move and discover check and also check, even if both those pieces now are in danger, the one who's checking from discovery and the other one who landed, you can move that knight right into a place where he's going to get killed, but they have to move the king. Now that's dangerous because now you have two pieces that you have to resolve. So you might end up losing one of the pieces. So you better have checkmate within one move or this is worth it. But yeah, I moved the rook to check the king. His queen could touch the rook, but his queen can't move because my queen is pinning his queen against his king. So he had to move the king, and now I get his queen, and then he gave up. Because again, that's like a little tactic of like if you're boxing, like dropping your guard. And I don't know much about boxing, but from watching like MMA and stuff, that's the only boxing I watch. I watched the Floyd fight with Conor because he's an MMA guy. But if you have a deficiency in your technique, it could be exploited. And I think a habit of interposing pieces in order to save them is a deficiency. I don't know if I'd had such a geography in the game that I don't know if he could have gotten out of it if I was just playing slow and methodically. And when I got his king out of the corner, I think I was going to run it. And that's where they say fight behind your pawns. I don't know if that's completely true, but if you use your time to develop the geography you want, everything else becomes easier in the end. And I'm trying to teach myself that. Most of it is patience. In fighting too, I'm sure. Most of strategy is having patience to allow small setups to have big payoffs later on. And that's why strategy is usually not the strength of the young, because we have to work on our patience, right? What was a good one? Cowboy Cerrone fucking got an arm bar, and the other guy made a technique mistake where he should have, I think, rolled or turned into it. But yeah, usually with an arm bar you want to turn into it. But basically he didn't move the right way when Cowboy first got it. I forgot the guy he was going up against. I know Cowboy because he's been fighting for a while. I don't watch everyone. And then Cowboy got the arm, and then the guy stood up, tried to slam him, do this and that. But once you get the technique right, it took him like maybe 20, 30 seconds to get the guy to tap, and I think he broke his arm. But that patience of getting it the right way, then you just ride it out. Maybe that's what I'm doing here, trying to armbar my subconscious by exposing it. All right, what did we just watch? I fucking talked all that out. The Great Brain. When I was young, I would read these books. That chess game was in my head because I just played it. The Great Brain is a series of children's books by American author John Dennis Fitzgerald from 1906 to 1988. Set in the small town of Addenville, Utah between 1896 and 1898, the stories are loosely based on Fitzgerald's childhood experiences, chronicled by the first-person voice of John Dennis Fitzgerald. The stories mainly center around the escapades of John's mischievous older brother, Tom Dennis Fitzgerald, a.k.a. the Great Brain. So I imagine myself either as the Great Brain or the author of this, the narrator, is the younger brother. So he's talking about his older brother, the Great Brain. But so it's cool because it wasn't too much ego. So it's not like I thought I was a great brain. You hear this guy's exploits and then you want to imitate them or imagine someone's like that. But in their family and in their childhood, it wasn't just about being smart. It was that you can also whoop everyone in your class and 2 classes above. That's how the family was. So the Great Brain, when he's instructing the narrator, being his older brother and kind of like coaching him and around like classes and like kids and stuff and bullies, that's one of the things is that like someone's picking on him and he's like, no, you have to be able to stand up for yourself against everyone your age and 2 ages older, because that's what we do. And then the Great Brain also, he went off to either high school I think, somewhere else. That's a private school. And that was an interesting, there's a bunch of, here are the series titles: The Great Brain, More Adventures of the Great Brain, Me and My Little Brain, The Great Brain at the Academy. That's the one where he goes to the academy. And that's the last one I read. And then I don't know about the rest of these. It's like, what would they say nowadays about bullying in this? There's fighting in this. The kids bully each other, they fight each other, but there's balance, and there's like, it's just his childhood reflected a lot like my childhood. It's like most of it were tests of strength, and like they had Indian arm wrestling or Indian wrestling, which is where you lock legs and try to flip each other over. We actually tried that, me and my friends. I would tell them about this book, and I'd be like, we should try this. Um, Yeah, the Fitzgerald family have Tom Dennis Fitzgerald, the narrator of the series, the youngest of three brothers. Thomas, that's John, and then Tom is a mischievous mill brother and swindler extraordinaire. His nickname is Great Brain, and his escapades are the basis for the series. Throughout the series, Tom demonstrates that he possesses great intelligence and a money-loving heart, but at times he also demonstrates great humility and generosity. And then Swain, I don't remember Swain so much. He and Tom attend Catholic boarding school together. After graduating that, Swain departs for Pennsylvania to live with relatives, where he attends his father's alma mater high school. He and Tom are 2 years apart, but Tom is only one grade behind Swain. Because in Addenville, his teachers let him skip the 5th grade. So he skipped a class. And then the Papa, he's the owner, editor, and publisher of the town paper, Irish Catholic. Yeah, this book was important. You know, in that book, there's a Jewish guy who has a store, and they're going through hard times. I think it's the winter, and the store. This is a small town where the Jewish guy owns a store, and you go in and you buy stuff, and no one hears from him in a while, and then they go in and he's dead in the back. I'm not even reading this up because I'm just trying to do it from memory. And he died because people weren't shopping at a store or something. They didn't notice that so-and-so stopped buying their meat from the store, so-and-so stopped doing this or that, and they didn't notice that he was starving to death from a lack of income, and he was so proudful he didn't ask for help. I didn't really get this. This is one of the first times I actually thought, like, oh, Judaism's a different culture, like, because these guys are Irish Catholic, or Catholic, or whatever they just said. But yeah, that's what the perspective of the book is at. And the mom scolds the family and the whole town, saying that we didn't go and check in on him because he was, well, they don't say because he was Jewish, but basically, like, it's done subtly enough that it wasn't preachy, but it made me reflect on, like, I got that it was a metaphor for World War II, and I was only in 5th grade when I read it, but I was like, that's how these things happen, because then you hear about, oh, like, later on when they teach about the Holocaust and stuff, and I don't know, I don't think it was in the normal history books, but we could have accepted refugees, and we didn't. So this Holocaust happened out of neglect on the part of the humanity, whereas the main story usually is because one evil person, Hitler, killed a bunch of people because he had so much evil in his heart. But in order for evil to exist and flourish in the world, it takes a lot of good people to do nothing. And that's what I was learning in my small little children's social groups, and that's what this guy put into his book as a metaphor or an allegory or analogy or whatever you would call it, that the town didn't notice that the Jews' business was dying, and he died himself of starvation because of it, and no one went in to check on him or offer help when they easily would have, and he was a part of the community, and the mother scolds everyone for that. And I think the guy, there's a lot of wisdom and subtlety. There's a lot of wisdom in subtlety, and there's a lot of good art and people who contextualize the world for us among us. I'm not the only one who's trying. I just found Charlie Chaplin, and then we have MLK over here pulling out Nietzsche to try to inspire the people he's speaking to trust and love. Saying, I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm strong, demanding love. Love corrects everything in the way of love. What does he say? Justice corrects injustice. And love corrects everything in the way of love. That's what Che Guevara said. The true revolutionary has a heart inspired by love. But some people will only point out to anyways, who cares about those people? The yeah, the great brain went off to boarding school, that Catholic school, in that one where he's at the academy. And immediately he picks out some people in the group that he likes their personality. He says, "You're going to be my friends." And they turn out to be similar types dudes. And I've always felt, especially when I went in the army, with a bunch of people, you quickly tell character and then you make your bets on, like, all right, this dude's going to be cool. And that's what my army buddy, when he didn't rat me out in basic training. And that's like the guy who's a lawyer in Santa Cruz now. But he proved his character way back when. I mean, we don't, a lot of people in my life are wondering what the fuck I'm doing with it. So he has a family, and I understand. People don't want my volatility in their life, but he has a good character from the very beginning. He's Zen without even knowing he's Zen. Well, but he reads a little of it. But I think it's more about him being in the ocean. I was thinking about that. How did Homeboy become so Zen? He doesn't read that much Zen and Bushido shit. He's aware of it. I think it's the ocean, and you're working with energy way bigger than yourselves. And if you don't have that peace and humility, you're not going to be doing it as long as the next guy who is. You're going to get tossed or thrown, or you're going to motorcycle riding. He rides a motorcycle, and you have to ride within your abilities, or else it's suicidal. I knew people when I went to motorcycle school who said that they'd never have an accident. Sometimes it's out of your control. A lot of times it is. But I always thought that if you had a motorcycle, eventually you were going to get in an accident. And these teachers were like, "No, I've never been in an accident. Just work on your skill set, ride within your abilities. You could always improve your skill set every now and then, and improve your emergency stopping, just like what we were doing in the class. Getting around objects, you can always be improving your skill set. And that's also you ride up, you don't really want to exceed your abilities, but you can grow them. You can get in and out of turns better. You can think, what would I do if this or that? You can feel like you keep your options open, like chess. If you're riding and there's people around you, that's not really a safe place for a motorcycle to be. You want to have a little bit of openness around you. So if you get into traffic, you try to get away from it. You don't really want to be hanging out in people's blind spots. There's certain ways to keep yourself safe on a motorcycle. And then my friend, he drives down the Highway 1 from San Francisco, lays flat on the motorcycle under the moonlight, turns off his lights, and tells me it felt like flying. He's just on the motorcycle, laying flat, feet hanging off the back, just fucking with his lights off under the moon going down Highway 1. That's probably asking for trouble. But Keanu Reeves used to do that. He called it ghost riding. Turn off his lights and ride at night without no lights. Yeah, you accept the risks that you take into life. You live to tell the tale, but I'm sure you don't want to do that all your life. He has 2 daughters, this guy, so I'm sure he doesn't ghost ride anymore, but he did it. The Great Brain is an academy, and some guy's challenging him, and he tells the guy, he's like, back where I'm from, we whoop everyone our grade and 2 grades. Oh, no, I don't think he tells it to the guy. But the guy's testing him, and he's like, all right, it was some bet or something, because the Great Brain wasn't a bully. But something happened where, this was something I wrote recently. Once you disarm someone of logic, usually they have 2 other responses, emotional or physical. So you should probably prepare for both. So you should have a little bit of a thick skin so they can't cut you down with some bullshit insults which don't have logic, but they're picking on insecurities. I guess that's why I've been always trying to work on getting out my insecurities. But then also physically, you want to be a little bit physically confident. Like that guy who says, I can put you in the face right now. If I hadn't been in physical stuff before, that might have shook me. But I just looked at him like, that's fucking, you just lost, dude. So if that's all you got, that's not, it's like you lost the reasonable argument, so now you're going to try to intimidate me? Like, I wouldn't be talking to you like this if I was capable of being intimidated. You're bigger than me to begin with. Fucking, not gonna fight me in this bar, dude. You just told me you had a newborn kid. Fucking, you have a great life. You see I'm here with people too. This isn't gonna be a simple fight. I ain't say all that. You don't have to say all that. We both see the board. I just smiled at him. I was like, you don't want to do that, man. But yeah. So the guy, but that's where did I get these ideas from? And which get me into trouble sometimes. I gotta learn when to run my mouth and when not to. I probably ran my mouth too much that night. I did, because he kept coming back. And yeah, but whatever. We both learned from each other. That was like in March, early in this year of introspection, when I was starting to test my philosophy against the world more. which could be a dangerous thing to do, trying to fight with homeless people. I just read some article about some girl who got killed by a homeless guy, pulled a knife on her. There's a bunch of stupid shit I do that I probably shouldn't do, but you learn. Like ghostwriting. I should use that term when you do stupid shit you shouldn't do because you're testing your philosophy against the world. You're ghostwriting because you're begging to be made a ghost, right? Tempting fates. But that's the young energy, young male energy. Fucking walk your baby nuts around the block, and that's what I say a lot. Walking your baby nuts around the block trying to fucking act your heart. No, that's what they would say in the army. They would say, this ain't the block no more. You ain't back on the block. You ain't shit here. They would tell us that all the time in basic training. You ain't back on the block. Basically just letting you know to respect authority here. So the great brain won some bet or something, and the guy tried to just bully his way out of the bet, and the great brain wouldn't back down. And then the guy backs down. And then his friends, his newly made friends at the academy are like, oh my gosh, that guy was bigger than you, man. Like, fucking good thing that you bluffed him. And the great brain was like, that wasn't a bluff. Where I come from, we fight everyone our age and 2 years older. He's like, that guy doesn't know me. And then I always like had that feeling too. It's like you wanted to be a little bit tougher than your average competition. You wanted to be able to, like, you're not going to be the toughest person, but you want to be a little bit better than what is your average. And so, like, when we were in wrestling, sometimes I'll get the heavyweights, but we would do a thing where we would all wrestle each other, and then the winner would wrestle the next one. So the two lightest go, and then the next one up, and the next one up. And by the time it got to me, I could usually get the 130s or 35s, 40s, and then we didn't have many, but I could get like the 3 or 4 guys above me. And then when it got to our heavy guy, 200, 210, it's really hard to take that guy down. And once he gets on you, all that weight. But I remember going up against like the 165, 180 pound dudes, and they're throwing you around. Like, everyone would circle around us, and it was a pretty good. People who wrestle and fight love to watch it as well as do it. And wrestling someone who has a lot more muscle than you is interesting. Because the dude's like locking up because that's all he knows how to do. But now you can fucking you can do the ankle picks and the stupid shit. It's technique and other stuff. So that's stuff that was in my mind from an early age. That strength is just one advantage. I guess chess got me all fucking testosterone out where I'm all about competition today. But MLK is talking about love. Let's talk about love. I'll have to pee. Can I make it 18 minutes? I can make it 18 minutes. Shaz, come on. We ain't children. You have a bladder. You can hold it. I just might be moving a little bit. Yeah, that's the difference. I guess let's relate it to MLK and Malcolm. That's the difference between MLK and Malcolm. Malcolm was more the tactician strategy guy based in the realpolitik. MLK was a different breed. He went to school. He came from good parents. Malcolm's dad was killed by white supremacists. Malcolm lived a little bit more real. If MLK grew up in my apartment complex, Malcolm was coming up from the back entrance with those kids. Malcolm was a bad kid for most of his life. And then he went to jail. And then in jail he read the dictionary and joined their debate society. And he had an intelligence that, although he used, it's like a cliche now, the black self-educated man who is overly verbose. Let me vituperate what the expected reciprocations are of the logical, so blah, blah, blah. It's like, I guess, I don't know, maybe like Jesse Jackson or these other guys have. Maybe that's the parody of them. But if you watch Malcolm speak, and what I love is, so he is that energy and that presence that you see in like Fred Hampton, but like he owned it and controlled it. His energy wasn't superfluous, and his words weren't superfluous. He had a really good vocabulary, self-taught. I could see him when he's sitting there, you see on these YouTube videos, and he's talking to people. He had a rage from going up against something that took his childhood, it took his father. He saw the path that he was set on by life. He wasn't, because you see the piece later on when he finds religion, and a good woman is a big part of that, and a family, and religion with Elijah Muhammad, but then he moves on, and he says, after he goes to Mecca is when he really opened up his heart, right? He said that over there I met white people and I didn't feel the anger and the animosity that I feel here, because over there they just describe themselves. They're just describing a characteristic of themselves. I'm white. But over here it's describing a power. Like, there was a saying back then, free, white, and 21. And that was a normal saying, that you have everything going for you. You got youth, you're American, you're free, and you're white. White was, and still is in a lot of ways, considered an advantage. And that's what I don't like about this whole white privilege. Is there's structural stuff wrong with our power structures of society. But using these terms almost reinforces these negative stereotypes. Minority. Minorities are going to be the majority in California, but minority has a negative connotation of disempowerment. Just the fact of being called a minority disempowers you in a certain way. It's kind of like calling someone like small dick or something like that. It's like, I never really liked being called a minority. Because it implies a majority. So he said that after he went to Mecca, he started to understand that his animosity was towards specific people and specific injustice, whereas before he had a general hate against a generalized. And if you don't separate that when you're listening to him and know what period of life he is in, you can't check his blind spots. The main reason I'm doing this is to check my own blind spots. Everyone has blind spots. And then you understand the context. This is Shaz shortly after becoming two-bag Shaz, and shortly after getting out of relationships with very beautiful women. I'm on my own here, so there's some prickliness that I'm probably going to mellow out. But that's the stuff that I really liked Malcolm's view of the world that he approached towards the end of his life. He was like, they firebombed his house and he just grabbed a rifle and he got his kids out of that room. And then he gave a speech the next day, or later on that day maybe. He says, I'm sorry if I smell like smoke, but they firebombed my house last night. And yeah, there's a picture of him with a rifle looking out his window. He's like, all right, this is what we're doing. He knew how to shoot a gun. This is what we're doing. They got him because he decided not to use security to check people before that one speech. He decided to not put the metal detectors up to check people, and then they had the guns come in and shoot him. That was a choice. The people at the top didn't see the board. He saw what was coming. He probably, who knows if he thought he was going to the UN to hold the United States accountable for humanitarian violations of human rights. He was like, all right, this is a board we're playing. Let's just bring the hypocrisy to the head. Let's take the world system for establishing justice, and that isn't that what Gandhi did too? Is held the British Empire against their own standards of fair play, throwing waves of nonviolent protesters against people who had brutalized them, to put that in the media and show the media that, look, this isn't, you're not civilized. This isn't. They said, what's your thoughts on Western civilization? It would be a good idea. It isn't you. Look at what you do. Look at the face of your violence and brutality, which is why they have to manage the information coming out of Iraq. We're not the good guys based on what we're doing. It's colony. It's clear cut. We didn't liberate Iraq. There's nothing honorable or noble about going over there. You don't liberate a country by bombing it, instigating civil war, and partitioning its factions and promoting sectarian strife. Well, you don't liberate anything in the dark, and a lot of what we've done is in the dark. If what we were doing was honorable, then why do we have to hide it? Why does it have to be in secret? It's just obvious. It takes a fucking 5-year-old to figure this shit out. We just don't talk about it. That's why it festers. We have wounds that are open and festering that we don't talk about. But MLK, yeah, what was MLK's issue? He only, a year before the end of his life, came out against the Vietnam War. He did that because he read Ramparts magazine in an airport. And he told his associates, I can't stay silent about this anymore, because they ran those pictures about the little naked girl running away from the village on napalm on fire. Ramparts. Ramparts had enough of effect on the culture in order to break through the fucking bullshit propaganda and get people like MLK to turn against the war. So what happened to Ramparts? Well, Rolling Stone, appropriated their font type, the exact same font type, colors, everything. Rolling Stone looks like Ramparts. You don't hear about Ramparts magazine, you hear about Rolling Stone. Because the counterculture got appropriated by the dominant culture. Rolling Stone is the one that pushed for the voting age to be pushed down to 18. So now they're for the good fight. But they're also the ones who put Barack Obama, Bill Clinton on their cover. Hunter S. Thompson got so fed up with them, he broke off from them. Hunter S. Thompson got a cocaine habit from Rolling Stone. I didn't even know that. Fucking Sticky Fingers, the story about the founder of the Rolling Stone, is a pretty good eye-opener about what they're all about. They're all about hedonism through the promotion of the power structures and getting the reward. It's a pure self-promotional cynicism. The founder of that magazine would wear Mick Jagger's clothes backstage. He just wanted to be in the scene. He came out later on as gay. So these people, most of the people with like maliciousness in their heart, don't even know who they are. But that's the thing. It's like that kid I would walk around with when I was young, and he's making up all these stories. And then he comes out as gay later on too. I think a friend of mine told me he transitioned now to a woman. But it's like, how much is this kid being honest with himself? Back then or now? Who am I to judge him? I don't know, but I know he didn't value intellectual honesty as much as I did. And it got him into trouble sometimes. But what did I value? I valued not brutality, but intellectual honesty, physical strength, having a word, respect, humility, stuff like that. What did Martin Luther King Jr. value? He cheated on his wife, I think. That's what the FBI tried to blackmail him, they said. Sent him pictures of his affairs saying, you might as well kill yourself now. It's going to be worse if you don't. Which he didn't, which took a lot of personal courage. He exhibited courage. Here he's exhibiting intellectual acumen for him to... I respect that so much for him to, because he's not talking to people who have PhDs in fucking theology. Like, he is a very as educated as you can expect a civil rights leader to be. And eloquent, and to be able to break down a complex topic for the layman is one of the most needed things to do. Right now I'm reading about anarchist history where they're trying to organize the workers. It's hard enough in life to get the perspective where you think you finally figured out what's going on. Harder still to then break that down so someone who hasn't spent their life studying it is on the same page as you, to break it down into like 5-year-old language. So for him to even attempt that, and that's something that we want to talk about, his legacy, just like we want to talk about his solidarity with the workers, or we're going to talk about next his views on economics, which are amazing. Like, he was, if he didn't get to it as soon as you would have liked, because life is complicated, and also power corrupts, and he's starting to become a powerful person, and that's how you co-opt the leadership of organizations. You offer them power and candies, and who knows if those affairs were sincere or nah, I don't know. You could probably look it up. They were probably sincere. Just people in position of authority attract women. But and he's a little bit of a chubby dude, so you can tell his appetites. Usually people with the food appetite also have the sexual appetite. Food and sex are closely related. My dad has a gut now, and I tell him, your appetites, you have trouble controlling your appetites. I've already seen it with the fucking internet shit. Which he's doing better. I don't think he's fallen victim to that internet shit anymore. He used to be off and on with that porn shit, and I'm not a hypocrite, but I don't. I mean, the same with the food. I eat sweets when... I don't really like sweets, actually. I try not to. But I like food, though. And yeah, I like food. I have an appetite. But what is it? I was going to mention MLK, love, Nietzsche. He notices. That's the fucking main thing about this, Shaz. You've been talking about yourself a lot, but it's okay. You had stuff you felt you needed to talk about. I had to go to workout today too, so I'm in that slower mode. I did I just did some shit. I did a cable row. Someone was on the machine. I was like, fuck it, I'll do a different exercise. So I grabbed the cable and I just pulled it back like that to get the back. So you're doing like a reverse fly. And that was like really killed the back. It's good. It's good. Um, Still gotta pee. I've gotta pee, so drink more coffee. he noticed that in the dominant narrative, we have this idea of the will to power. And he's noticing that Nietzsche was, he wasn't anti-Semitic, I don't think. He was educated enough to not, you have to be kind of ignorant to think that you could simplify life just down to a certain group of people or a certain class. So anyone who's a higher enough intellectual level, there's scientific arguments against racism or against all these sloppy thinkings. And so what you do, I find that they're propagated by separating cause and effect, and then people fill the middle with sloppy thinking. That's what they've done with our war in Iraq. By not explaining it in terms of empire and actual historic patterns, they're allowing people to just fill in the gap that, oh, just Islam and Muslims and this and that. The same thing with Barack Obama, by not having a substance to who he is and a value discussion. Now I think that this is propagating racism. Well, and also because a lot of his narrative is based off of race instead of values. And so now that's what Morgan Freeman said once, and he got shit for it. It's like, I'm not a black man, I'm a man. The less we fucking make this a central issue, the more we're going to progress. And people thought it was him absconding from his responsibility as a black man to talk about this stuff. But there's values is more important to talk about than race. And then the symptoms of the wrong values are racism, misogyny, these other things. But if we just stick with the victim class, we allow for this con to continue where people hide behind the victim class in order to promote their own interest. And that's something that we have to be aware of. I have to be aware of, Shaz. Me and you. Me in the present, you in the future. But yeah, MLK noticed that the Nietzsche was being used as an excuse for a lot of idiocy. And his idea, he was a really good Jack London, whose opinion I respect. He had his blind spots. He described it as he traveled around the wheel of logic, but then flew off into insanity, which apparently towards the end of his life he was insane. I haven't really looked into Nietzsche. Knowing that myself, I have an issue with ego, and I'm trying to learn more humility and calmness. I'll get to it when I do. Just like only now am I reading anarchism, having enough other opinions in my head, because I've seen people who, the young anarchist and the young communist, and I was like, yeah, one of them attacked me with a metal bat, right? If I wasn't physically capable, how was I going to get out of that situation? That dude didn't want to fucking have a conversation. Blocking my exit with a fucking Louisville slugger. But anyways, I talk about that story too much. Yeah, you do this sometimes when you drink too, guys who drink, and you talk about your war stories and your scars and stupid shit, and you get rowdy, and before you know it, someone wants to fight because you've talked your way into a fucking rowdiness. This bar owner in Puerto Rico, he was like, that's why I don't play fights. I noticed if I ever play fights in my bars, fights break out. People just get rowdy. He refused to play fights in his bars. That's fine. I was like, the guy's been in enough fights that he knows. He's the guy who takes out his teeth and says, I got 4 teeth left. You can come after him if you want. But yeah, so for MLK to contextualize this and say that in the larger scheme of things, that's what he was saying in there. He just wasn't using the language of narratives and dominant narratives and culture. But he felt like we had to talk about this, get this right. Love is not weakness. Love is power. Peace is power. Calmness and quiet strength is power. There's a strength, but that's our culture right now celebrates the gaudy, the fake, the egoist on both sides. Trump is just a stupid egoist, but Barack Obama is the slick egoist. He's a con man. He's the guy who, without substance, and yet you should respect him because he made it. We should respect people who are at the top regardless of how they got there. And only if they were really egregious in their climbing to the top, like a Donald Trump, do we actually ridicule them. But other people, if you inspect their lives for values and character and you find it amiss, that's not enough to condemn them in our society, because the cynicism comes out and they say, well, that's just what they needed to do to get by. You know, Hillary Clinton can be on TV still, even though the shit that we found out in her emails shows you a lack of values-based discussion. I think that's what I keep coming back to, so that's good. And I talk about the childhood because I'm trying to find out where the values came from. And I'm really lucky that I have these things where I put down where I found values in history, and then I put them to music so that they'll get into my brain easier. These men of values are foundational, I think, to the things that keep me going in life. So thank you, Shaz, for